The Mysterious Benedict Society, Chapter 1, Pencils, Erasers, and Disqualification. In a city called Snowtown, near a port called Snowtown, in a city called Stonetown, near a port called Stonetown Harbor, a boy named Rene Moldren was preparing to take an important test. It was the second test of the day. The first had been in an office across town. After that, he was told to come here, to the Monk Building on 3rd Street, and to bring nothing but a single pencil and a single rubber eraser, and to arrive no later than 1 o'clock. If he happened to be late or bring 2 pencils, or forget his eraser, or in any other way deviate from the instructions, he would not be allowed to take the test. And that would be that. Rene, who very much wanted to take it, was careful to follow the instructions. Curiously enough, these were the only ones given. He was not told how to get to the Monk Building, for example. He had found it necessary to ask directions to the nearest bus stop, acquire a schedule from a dishonest bus driver who tried to trick him into paying for it, and walk several blocks to catch the 3rd Street bus. Not that any of this was difficult for Rene Moldren, although he was only 11 years old. He was quite used to figuring things out for himself. From somewhere across the city, a church bell struck the half hour, 12:30. He still had a while to wait. When he checked the doors of the Monk Building at noon, they were locked, so Rene had bought a sandwich at the deli stand and sat down on the park bench to eat. A tall building in Stonetown's busiest district must surely have many offices inside, he thought. Locked doors at noon seemed a little peculiar. But then, what hadn't been peculiar about this whole affair? To begin with, there was an advertisement. A few days before, Rene had been reading the newspaper over breakfast at the Stonetown orphanage, sharing sections with his tutor, Miss Pernumel. As Rene had already completed all of the textbooks on his own, even those for high school students, the orphanage director had assigned him a special tutor when the other children went to class. Miss Pernumel didn't quite know what to do with Rene either, but she was intelligent and kind, and in their time together they had grown fond of sharing the morning newspaper over breakfast and tea. The newspaper that morning had been filled with the usual headlines, several of them devoted to what was commonly called the emergency. Things had gotten desperately out of control, the headlines reported. The school systems, the budget, the pollution, the crime, the weather, why, everything, in fact, was a complete mess, and citizens everywhere were clamoring for a a dramatic improvement in government, and things must change now. Things must change now was the slogan plastered across the billboards all over the city. It was a very old slogan, and although Rene rarely watched television, he knew the emergency was the main subject of the news programs every day, as it had been for years. Naturally, when Rene and Miss Pernumel first met, they had discussed the emergency at great length, finding themselves quite in agreement about policies. However, they soon found such conversation boring and decided to drop the subject. In general, then, they talked about the other news stories, those that varied day to day, and afterward they amused themselves by reading the advertisements. Such was the case on that particular morning when Rene's life had so suddenly taken a turn. "Do you care for more honey with your tea?" Miss Pernumel had asked, speaking in Tamil, a language she was teaching him. But before Rene could answer that, of course he wanted more honey, an advertisement caught Miss Pernumel's eye, and she exclaimed, "Rene, look at this. Would you be interested?" Miss Pernumel sat across the table from him, but Rene, who had no trouble reading upside down, quickly scanned the advertisement's bold printed words. "Are you a gifted child looking for special opportunities?" How odd, he thought. The question was addressed directly to children, not to their parents. Rene had never known his parents, who died when he was an infant, and it pleased him to read a notice that seemed to take this possibility into account. But still, how odd. How many children read the newspaper, after all? Renee did, but he had always been alone in this and had always been considered an oddball. If not for Miss Pernumel, he might even have given it up by now to avoid some of the teasing. "I suppose I might be interested," he said to Miss Pernumel, "if you think I would qualify." Miss Pernumel gave him a wry look. "Don't you play games with me, Renee Moldrun. If you aren't the most talented child I've ever known, then I've never known a child at all." There were to be several sessions of the test administered over the weekend. They made plans for Renee to attend the very first session. Unfortunately, on Saturday, Miss Pernumel's mother fell ill, and Miss Pernumel couldn't take him. This was a real disappointment to Renee, and not just because of the delay. He always looked forward to Miss Pernumel's company. Her laughter, her wry expressions, the stories she told, often in Tamil, of her childhood in India, even the occasional sighs she made when she didn't think he was aware. They were gentle and lilting, these sighs, and despite their melancholy, Renee loved to hear them. Miss Pernumel sighed when she was feeling sad for him, he knew. Sad to see him teased by the other children, sad the poor boy had lost his parents, and Renee wished he hadn't worried her, but he did like knowing she cared. She was the only one who did, not counting Seymour the orphanage cat, with whom Renee spent the day in the reading room. And he only wanted to be petted. Quite apart from his eagerness to take the special test, Renee simply missed Miss Pernumel. He was hopeful then when Miss Rutger, the orphanage director, informed him late in the evening that Miss Pernumel's mother was considerably improved. Renee was in the reading room again, the only place in the orphanage where he could be assured of solitude. No one else ever ventured into it, and freedom from persecution. At dinner, an older boy named Victor Mongroff had tormented Renee for using the word enjoyable to describe the book he was reading. Vic thought it too fancy a word to be used, and soon had gotten the entire table laughing and saying, "Enjoyable," in mocking tones, until Renee had finally excused himself without dessert and retreated here. "Yes, she's much, much better," said Miss Ruttinger through a mouthful of cheesecake. He was a thin man, Mr. Ruttinger, sorry. He was a thin man with a thin face, and his cheeks positively bulged as he chewed. "Miss Pernumel just telephoned with the news. She asked for you, but as you were not to be found in the dining hall, and I was in the middle of dinner, I took the message for you." "Thank you," said Renee with a mixture of relief and disappointment. Cheesecake was his favorite dessert. "I'm glad to hear it." "Indeed, nothing like health, absolutely nothing like it. Best thing for everyone," said Mr. Ruttinger, but here he paused in his chewing with an unpleasant, worried expression upon his face, as if though perhaps there had been an insect in his food. Finally, he swallowed, brushed the crumbs from his waistcoat, and said, "But see here, Renee, Miss Pernumel mentioned a test of some sort. Special opportunities, she said. What's this all about?" "This isn't about attending an advanced school, is it?" They had been through this before. Renee had repeatedly asked permission to apply elsewhere, but Mr. Ruttinger insisted Renee would fare better here with a tutor than at advanced school. "Here you are comfortable," Mr. Ruttinger had told him more than once, and more than once Renee had thought, "Here I'm alone." But in the end, Mr. Ruttinger had his way, and Miss Pernumel was hired. It had proved a blessing. Renee would never complain about Miss Pernumel. Still, he had often wondered what life might be like at a school where other students didn't find him so odd. "I don't know, sir," Renee said, his hopefulness slipping into dejection. He wished Miss Pernumel hadn't mentioned the test, though. Of course, she must have felt obliged to. "We just wanted to see what it was about." Mr. Ruttinger considered this. "Well, no harm in seeing what things are about, I suppose. I should like to know what it is about myself. In fact, why don't you prepare a report for me when you return? Say 10 pages? No hurry. You can turn it in tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow evening?" said Renee. "Does that mean I'm taking the test?" "I thought I told you," said Mr. Ruttinger with a frown. "Miss Pernumel will come for you first thing in the morning." He took out an embroidered handkerchief and blew his nose with great ferocity. And now, Renee, I believe I'll leave you to your reading. This dusty room is hardship on my sinuses. Be a good man and run a feather duster over the shelves before you leave, will you? After hearing this news, Renee could hardly return to his reading. He flailed about in the feather duster with the feather duster and went straight to bed, as if doing so would hasten the morning's arrival. Instead, it lengthened his night, for he was far too eager and anxious to sleep. Special opportunities, he kept thinking over and over again. He would have been thrilled to get a crack at plain old regular opportunities, much less special ones. All right, we'll stop right there. Boom. How do I do this? Okay. Okay, we'll stop right there.